GPuzzle, welcome to the Kriegsspiel Umpiring Chat Show.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you here, man. So you're on the East Coast of the United States of America, aren't you?
No, I was there for a while. Currently, I'm based out of the dark and sinful land of Brazil.
You're in Brazil. Good gravy.
Yep.
So you're still on East Coast time.
U.S. An hour ahead.
GMT -4 then.
Great. I'm generally an hour ahead. Sometimes two when it's not. When the guys aren't on daylight time.
Outstanding.
I mostly work with people from the U.S., so this is just a perfectly normal time for me. It's just like, it's just an hour ahead.
So you're in Brazil.
Yep.
That's fantastic. Have fun. That's great.
No, absolutely.
And what got you interested in wargaming? What's the and then how did we have the good fortune to get you into Kriegsspiel?
How did I get into Kriegsspiel? I started when I started getting into. I'm actually going to start a little bit earlier. I started getting really into history when I was like 11.
Yeah.
And because I had a very good history teacher then, and then I got a few books on these sorts of very classical historical battles. Your the campaigns of Alexander, and I want to say to an extent a little bit about Rome, but I wasn't that much of a Rome fanatic. It was really about Alexander and sort of the Greeks at that point in time that I was really interested in.
Okay.
And that's how I got into it. And then when I was like 15, I must have been like 13. I started playing Civilization because that was a game a bunch of my friends had, and it was specifically Civilization 5. And I got really into it. It's one of my most played games. And then it was the point of like, I'm just gonna play I'm just gonna play a bunch of like different video games for a while. But I had been playing board games around the same time because I have a cousin who's a little bit older,
right,
who was really into just like all the. I would say like he got me into D&D. He got when I was like 11, and I got all of my friends into D&D. So I ended up being perma DM for a while. He got me into Magic the Gathering much later, that sort of thing. But one of the things that he did get me into was like board games. So at some point I was like, this is all really, really fun. And then I found out about Warhammer.
And you got around Warhammer?
No.
Oh, you avoided Warhammer.
I avoided Warhammer. I found out about the existence of Warhammer. I was like, this is really cool. Is there something that isn't on a setting that's like complete bullshit? Because Warhammer just like, it's very silly and it's horrendously expensive, and I was like, I don't have the money to do this.
Yeah, right. So you wanted to find. So it's easier to do Napoleonics than to do lizards and skeletons.
Yeah, and I was like, I'm gonna do that, funny. And then I found out actually the cheapest way of doing that is looking up print and play games.
I think you just invented something fantastic, and we're going to attribute it to you as Kriegsspiel, the poor man's Warhammer.
Good Lord.
It's a cheaper way to do it, right? We just go that angle.
I have somehow been getting steadily down in terms of like expenditure of time versus expenditure of money. It's the expenditure of time that I have to spend has been increasingly going up, whereas the expenditure of money that I have to spend has been increasingly going down.
I knew you were going to come up with something, and literally the first minute of the podcast, under 4 minutes, you come up with a new marketing thing for the IKS. You're an absolute genius. That's great.
Yeah. Cool. And then I got really into historical wargaming, and this was when I was like 17, 18, so I was terminally online. I had a terminal case of computer disease.
Yeah.
So I was just going around and looking at like, where can I discuss about historical wargaming? And with like people who are not, all due respect, but people who are not my dad's age.
Right. Absolutely. Because they can't be trusted.
No, I just turned 25. This was like 7 years ago. I was like, I want to play with people who aren't like literally my dad's age.
Fair enough. That's fair enough. And here we are.
Yeah.
What did you make the obligatory stop into Total War and kind of go down that whole road?
No. I actually skipped Total War completely.
Right.
Because I played a couple of Total War games.
Yeah.
What I played a ton of was Victoria 2.
Okay.
Which is Paradox.
Yeah.
Because I've always been interested in like historical, like industrial history, in general.
Yeah.
So it was like, oh yeah, this looks fun. I like the Industrial Revolution. Let's play the one game that has the Industrial Revolution as a key part of it.
Now, did you when you were playing Dungeons and Dragons, you said you were always the dungeon master?
I started I was like 50-50.
Okay.
Right now I'm not. I would be the dungeon master when needed.
Okay. All right.
the
I'm always curious about that because there's something about being the dungeon master that is
Yeah.
similar to being an umpire for Kriegsspiel, and that was it's always something that's curious to me is how many people kind of came from.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I think the way that I look at it is that it's part of like this entire thing I've got of game design.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I made a ton of mods for a ton of different games. I made like maps for TF2 and Counter-Strike for a while, Team Fortress 2 and Counter-Strike for a while, which is game design. And then I made a bunch of mods for Civilization 5 for a very long time.
Okay.
As recently as like 2 years ago, I was still putting some of them out. I haven't put any of them out in a while just because I haven't had the time to do it.
Yeah.
Just
so you are very prolific with ideas in different maps, and you make a lot of things in the IKS, which is great. So so let's go to just umpiring in general. What's your favorite part? Do you like the research? Do you like the creation of the assets, or what part do you really enjoy?
I want to say it's a specific point. I always look at umpiring as like you go from you have all this historical data, you have all this historical information, all these points of data that you get from anecdotal information and actual like calculations and anything that you're trying to create this picture through essentially very high level guessing, and you're trying to boil that down to something that you can run within a reasonable amount of time. Within, I'm going to take off an hour and a half of my time, 2 hours, for a couple days, every week for the next like 3 months.
Right.
And for that you need to really simplify, because otherwise, I can't simulate every single guy in a regiment getting shot at.
Right.
That I can program that, I can write that code, but it's not going to be, half the time it's not going to be actually effective.
No, right. Now can you code? Are you a coder?
Oh yeah. I got my degree in computer engineering.
Okay.
So recently I not that recently, but earlier a while back, Zeke Zekon, who runs a couple of regimental level games where like the lowest level of the commander is a regiment at the American Civil War level. He asked me like, hey, can you do a combat calculator that I can just like input and then it spits out the results of any given battle based on this set of tables and these sorts of effects that we have, that I think it was Glorious Ruse who compiled it.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is, I greatly simplified it. You still have to input like a giant table into it.
Yeah.
But you say like, oh, this regiment is firing at this target. This you modify, multiply it by however much you want, and it just runs the entire calculation.
And so, what did you program this?
Yeah.
What did you program it in? What was the platform? And
Python. It's
man,
because Python is easy. Python is the kind of thing that this is basically just like the simplest. This is one of the simplest ways that you can do a program. It is just like you read a file, you create a new file, you do a bunch of calculations on it. It's literally got the acronym of CRUD. Create, read, update, delete.
Okay.
It's one of the most basic things that you can do, and it's like, this is I don't want to say like easy. It's kind of easy level. It's like your first intermediary level project if you try doing anything with it.
Right.
And it works. It works really well. It works especially well for these sort of things. If you're trying to handle more complex systems, I would recommend it if you have any sort of idea of how to code, like basic code.
So you have the potential to have gone into video games if you wanted to, because you can code, and that's kind of how you're oriented anyway, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And what is it
I've
about
developed a couple of video games with different friends.
what is it about our quirky format that drew you in? So if you could have gone off and made computer games, but you're over here doing Kriegsspiel. What is it about this more analog format that you like?
Because this is the only place where you can have a discussion about like genuine. This I'm going to reuse an example that I've used before.
Sure.
This is the only place that you can have a discussion on mew fodder in the internet in the 19th century and its effects on military operations.
Okay. Fair enough.
This was a legitimate discussion that I had, and it was me and Harappa, and we were going like,
Yeah.
oh, here's a quote from Wellington over like, this is the amount of food that a mule is expected to feed a horse within this many miles, and then I bring in like an actual order from the American Civil War Quartermaster Services specifying how much grain a mule needs for fodder.
Right. And there will be someone in the International Kriegsspiel Society who will debate you on the topic from a place of knowledge, and not that just making it up. They haven't seen an Instagram post on it. They have actually read the book on mule fodder, and they will tell you what page to go to find out.
Yes.
I'm with you. Okay, that's cool.
So going back to like the entire thing, I found out about Kriegsspiel, I think before the pandemic.
Okay, yeah.
But
before the pandemic,
at that
good
point,
for you.
Yeah, way before the pandemic. But and I was trying to like run it with people, but I knew this was going to be basically impossible because it wasn't going to happen. I ran a historical wargaming sort of campaign involving a bunch of different university clubs during like 2020. And afterwards, around the early 2022, I had finally come off from getting burned out of wargaming way too much, and not having that club kind of fell apart because some people dropped out of college. It was just not going through. And then I found out about the IKS because I had just moved to like a small town in the middle of nowhere for an internship. I was like, I need a hobby.
Yeah, right. No, it makes sense. Meet people, frankly.
Yeah. I found out about the IKS. I went like, these are my people.
Isn't that funny, right?
And
I think that there's that moment where we all join and actually say the words, these are my people, as frightening as that is, right? You look at Chief and say, my gosh, if this is my people, I'm a strange guy, but this is my people, right?
There are a lot of weird people on the internet. I think Chief is one of the more normal ones, honestly.
Swentz, good gravy. These are my people. I can't even, what does that say about it?
I think I joined before Chief and Swentz. It was like, oh yeah, no, here's here's like Damon and Desert Fox and James. At this point, James was already.
Oh goodness,
James wasn't. I think James hadn't even reached like 50 games played.
I know yet. He was. It took him a while to get off the ground. He's a slow learner, but now he's up around 150, so he's off and running. He finally figured it out. So let's talk a little umpiring. What is your philosophy on screenshots? What do you think about
screenshots?
It? What's your position on it? What's your take on screenshots? Large ones, small ones. What's the deal?
Small ones, small. I operate on the principle that like, the best way that I can describe it, have you ever stood out and tried to like see anywhere within 300 yards of where you are and try to spot like human figures?
Yeah, right.
They're going to be very, very small.
Sure.
I think here in the iCast we don't quite have. I know Damon has a few scripts for it. But we have a problem, which is that, like, how do you represent, like, at 300 yards, this is what people look like. At further than that, this is what people look like.
Right.
And trying to trace that through our sight lines. I kind of go a little bit claustrophobic with mine because it's the... I don't know if you've seen, there's a very good set of videos that we're blessed to see, which is people during the reenactment of... Waterloo.
I did see that. Yeah, with all the smoke coming from the line up on the ridge line where they were firing. Right?
Yes.
Yeah, the French.
But there's a few that are like point of view.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's a bunch of guy. Some of the guys, they're just there like for GoPro, and they're just like clad in
right.
Their French army uniform or whatever. Well, you get to see from their perspective. You can't see anything.
Sure,
the entire thing is just coated in smoke.
Yeah, right.
The minute shots start going off, it is absolute chaos, and you're not going to be able to identify anything for like 300 yards.
Yeah, right. What a crazy, what a crazy training that must have been, where you're really just firing into smoke in front of you and just kind of estimating where in the smoke to get fire through, if you think about it. But those were the technology of the time. So you're a line of sight screenshot guy, and you probably tend to be a little tighter on it, I guess, if I'm guessing from your.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it came up on a thread, and I just thought it was interesting to get. And what I said in the thread is there's a different philosophy for every umpire out there. So I thought I'd get yours on that. And so what is your approach on combat systems? Now there's different periods, of course, and there's different. But you sound like an analytical. Well, I know you're an analytical guy because we've had several strings back and forth online. But you're more of an analytical character. How do you approach combat systems in your games?
Combat should not be about like how many casualties you've taken.
Mm-hmm.
Combat should be still about your capacity to fight, and your capacity to fight is going to just like ebb and flow.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're going to be out of the fight for 30 minutes because you need to reorganize. Sometimes you're going to be out of the fight for, the rest of the fight because you're just completely out of luck. Sometimes you're just in a rout and you're not stopping until you reach. So it really should be a matter of like different states of fighting.
Yeah.
And that is something that goes for all sort of every single period. It's going to be your capacity to keep fighting as a cohesive unit, and as that sort of falls apart, but it should not be like meat points to steal a.
So how do you represent that as you track it as an umpire? Do you have kind of a morale track and a damage track, or what is your approach to getting that ebb and flow of a fight in your own perspective?
So I recently finished the Millsprings game.
Yep.
And at that one, I used Citizen Soldiers. And Citizen Soldiers is interesting because it separates the sort of like withdrawal/rout result from the damage result.
Which rule set was that? Say that again.
Citizen Soldiers, which was made by Carter a couple of years ago.
Okay. And is that in our list of rules?
That is in fact advertised in the IKS website.
Oh, really? Okay, great. All right.
Yep.
And so is that a D6, 2D6, D8?
It changes dice.
There's nothing more charming than dice. Is there little flags on the dice and everything?
No. I mean, I think you could, but basically it's just like if it is at a certain strain, you roll D20. If it is at a certain strain, you roll like a D12. If it's close combat, you roll D20, but with completely different odds from if you were rolling the same dice at long range.
Okay.
And the results are going to be the difference. The results are going to apply sort of like quote unquote meat point damage, which is just I want to say like a firepower downside. But there's also the shock effects, which are just like, oh, you roll poorly, you're now in a rout.
Yeah. Right. Okay. And so is that on a table or on the dice itself? Because I know there's different approaches. So you
technically they're kind of both the same thing, but it's effectively a table.
So when you actually perform the function of a resolution, how do you do that? Do you label the dice? What's your preference? Or do you look it up on a table, or do you know the table by heart?
I just look it up on a table because they've got it written out, and I can just pick it up the like actual physical dice and roll it. Yeah, which I appreciate.
Okay. And obviously, you resolve in TTS, or do you use another platform?
I resolve in TTS because TTS is what I know how to use.
Yeah.
There's probably, to be fair, there are cheaper options. I know Wayne uses Foundry, and that's really good.
He does, and he's got all kinds of stuff he does in Foundry.
Yep, and I know some people have considered Vassal, but viewing things on Vassal is weird. But also, that's like a free option, so you could do that.
I've tried Vassal. I find TTS more intuitive once you get kind of the basics of it, right? It simulates tabletop. Look at that.
TTS is basically just a physics simulator.
Right. That's right. You could even change the gravity in TTS, which is charming.
Yep.
So which periods do you like to, because we talked about that way of resolving combat, which periods do you prefer
Oh.
to umpire?
The one that I would love to umpire, but I have not like researched enough because I'm trying to do a very historically accurate sort of representation of it, is World War One.
World War
which
One.
is which is annoying because World War One is one of those just like so cluttered by ideas of what it actually was.
Yeah, right.
Right. There is very much the idea of like, oh, it's just charging into machine guns.
Right.
Which, I mean, to an extent, that's not fully wrong, but that's not fully right either.
Right. Correct.
Yeah. There are a lot more moving parts than just like, bayonet charge into a machine gun.
That's interesting. How would you approach kind of cracking that? Because certainly the hex and counter kinetic only approach with trenches is not that fun, and that's notoriously not modeled, except for some games try to do it.
Yep.
What approach would you take using Kriegsspiel to kind of crack World War One, if you could?
To crack World War One, you really have to start at like the fact that this is mostly about planning at, I want to say, starting at the division level.
Yeah.
It's about, okay, right. You've got a division. You've been given these resources. You've got this artillery that is within your jurisdiction. You've got additional artillery that's within your jurisdiction. You've got air power, which is absolutely nascent. And then you're going to say like, okay, what can I devote desire power to? What part of desire power can I devote to scouting, to seizing air superiority? In what areas? In close air support, which is like, this is another thing that has to be developed. So this is one of those things where it's just like, World War One is also annoying because the war shifts very drastically.
Right.
In terms of like what you expect. If you essentially have to make a different rule set or different options for almost every major battle. The British at Cambrai, the French at Verdun, first every single battle of Ypres is going to be very different, and there's like 4 of them.
That's a very interesting point, and I think a good one is that even in different portions of the war, there was a different approach to tactics, the use of equipment, the number of shells, right? Number of shells.
Number of shells, types of shells.
Types of shells, yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, they basically increased the number of smoke shells from like none to a ton to the most common type of smoke shell.
All right.
Of shell that they had. And smoke shells are incredibly important during that period of time. You're just looking at like the options that you have to have as a commander are very extensive, and it's very much about planning. And you're also dealing with the fact that this probably has the worst fog of war in any period.
Yeah, for sure.
Because you don't get radios. You really don't get radios. Yeah, what you do is very limited. So you're just half the time you're just like trying to talk through a field telephone, and you're like half a mile away or like several miles away, in the rear, and you're just like getting calls, and it's just like, what the hell is going on?
Which goes back to your first point about planning, because you had no wireless communication that was distributed, and so the steps of a battle that needed a lot of coordination all had to be done ahead of time because the wires were going to be torn up by the shells and things like that. That's super interesting. Yeah, you could almost 90% of the game could be the planning, and then you would just kind of resolve the battle, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
To an extent, you could say like, I mean, at that point, you're talking about timescales, and then it's a matter of like, okay, at what point can these people actually like react to what's going on in the fight? So a battle, I mean, it's why a lot of World War I battles are like day-long affairs. They're not like day-long affairs like you'd get with a Napoleonic battle, which is like at most, I think Leipzig's like 4 days total.
Right.
And then you look at other battles of the same sort of the same scale during the same period in time. You're looking at like Cambrai, which has very similar casualties to Leipzig, and that one is over the course of like 3 weeks.
Right.
This is a completely different ballpark.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I think you're onto a couple of interesting ideas or interesting threads that Kriegsspiel could explore, unlike a hex and counter game or one of these games where you have complete visibility. Because to your point, fog of war is so important, and you have to hit those planning phases just right. Which really planning is a big part of our format. That's great.
Yep.
Super interesting.
The other thing that I really like about Kriegsspiel is the human element.
Sure.
I mean, in other games, unless I've lucked out and I'm playing a game with like 5 people or whatever, which I did, I've gotten very lucky. Half the time, I can just like it's gonna be 1-on-1, and that's fun. It's fun to get together with just like a guy or 3 dudes. We have a couple of beers. We're rolling dice, and we're singing the battlefield or moving our minis around. It's like this is a pretty diorama that we're playing.
Right.
That we're pretending is a game. It's very pretty. It's very fun. I enjoy it, but there's not the like effect of because I've played a ton, and I've been in the shoes of Commander in Chief a lot.
Sure.
And it's just like half the time you're just managing people. You're just managing the guy who thinks is right all the time, the guy who's doing nothing, the guy who's just going to ignore whatever you're doing. And you take the players that are going to be like, okay, yeah, I'm going to do that, and these guys are worth their weight in gold.
Yeah, right. That's right. And there's another hugely under marketed part of although you've come up with the perfect marketing up front, is the poor man's Warhammer. But an under marketed element of this is that, really 75% of the game is people. The movement and all the mechanics and all that stuff of the board are pretty straightforward. But it's how we do dispatches and how we do that, which leads me to the question: what is your philosophy on communications and dispatches in a game? Are you a cut and paste and let it fly, or do you like Ruse has the from the saddle games? What's your philosophy on communication?
I like Ruses from the saddle games. I try. Mill Springs was a beginner game,
okay,
but I wanted them to get into that like from the start, which has paid off its dividend. There are a lot of I think there's like multiple players on Mill Springs that have signed up to be some of the James Umpire trainees.
Yeah, right. That's great.
Because you really, I think with Kriegsspiel, you really have to like get people the idea that you are a commander. It's closer to it is role playing a commander in the field and not playing the game. So I like Ruse's ideas a lot. But I also think I think that communicate. I was talking with Ruse about this the other day, and it's like the core, the central elements of Kriegsspiel that we basically just ignore because the basic one is simple and effective and works for black powder to an extent.
Right.
Is what we've got set up as the basic of like next turns are going to receive this dispatch. We've got the heat-seeking courier that's always going to give them the dispatch within the next 15 to 30 minutes.
Right.
It works. It creates enough of fog of war. And because it's players writing the dispatches, sometimes you just get like the worst dispatch ever, and you can't do anything about it.
Right.
Lord knows I've sent some terrible, terrible dispatches, just horrible.
Yeah. I've cut and pasted some of your terrible dispatches. I know of what you speak.
Oh no, you haven't seen anything.
I haven't seen anything.
My first dispatch was so bad I got an entire corps destroyed, and I was the division commander.
Yeah, right. Well, so do you try to slow them down at all? Do you do anything to you kind of introduce more fog of war? What's your philosophy on dispatches?
Dispatches, I think you really have to wait and see like what the situation is because. Going back to it because like American Civil War, wigwag signaling is a thing. You can, in theory, bypass the entire dispatch thing by waving around a flag. Do communications that are long distance. You can do that. You can that is a huge thing come World War I, where long distance communications via flag signaling.
That's another. I knew I could count on you for several excellent points, and this is the one that I want to stop and call out. Armies of those periods had flag signals where they had people on both sides who understood the signals, and they didn't need to write a long dispatch with, to my dear commander, your most obedient servant. They would have a dude on a tower throwing flags around. At Gettysburg, they had flag signaling. So I think it's interesting that nobody in our game says, okay, I go to my flag signaler, cut and paste this dispatch, and then you put a simple message in there. I think that's a great point. We should think about that. So all you umpires out there, start playing with that idea. We want to see some flag signaling systems in these games. Good point.
Yep. There, the most obvious one is people doing navals, because navals is just literally only flag signaling.
Right.
That's going to be your communication until like the 1900s when radios start becoming a thing.
Right. Right.
That's
how do you handle radio? Do you ever do that?
Oh God, no.
So you don't do any modern World War II stuff.
I haven't actually working. So most of my umpiring experience has been on what I'm going to call the Blitzspiels, which are very similar to your problems. They're live versions of your problems that I set up because I was trying to run a bunch of problems, and then I went, how do I run a game of Kriegsspiel within an hour for? We just have had a bunch of people join. I need to get a game for them, so they know what Kriegsspiel is. So they know what experience of like, this is what the fog of war is like. This is what issuing dispatches is like. This is just how it goes.
So talk about the Blitzspiels that you created. They're fast 1 hour games. What makes them? How do you construct them so they work?
So the first thing that I do is that I make very simple maps.
Okay.
They should not be. They're not like very easy to. They're not representative. They're very crude, but they are simple enough, and they're generally a famous historical battle that everybody knows.
Sure.
I've run the three of them that I've run have been Gettysburg, Stalingrad, and Waterloo.
There you go.
And then I flip the map around. I turn it 90 degrees. I disguise it in some way. I rename everything so it doesn't look like. It doesn't look like, oh, this is Belgium. This is this is Eastern Russia.
Right.
I change the time period. I change what weapons people have, but I essentially keep the bones of the scenario the same. And it's just a matter of like running a sort of like free Kriegsspiel thing. Like very simple. I use D12s because D12s have a lot of very simple ratios and odds that I could just roll and see like, oh, this was a success for the attack. This was a success for the defender, and by how much?
Yeah,
and then just roll with it, and try to get the game done in what I want to say just over an hour and a half.
These are live
problems that we have.
These are live. Obviously.
They're live.
Okay, and so very fast resolution, free Kriegsspiel in spirit. Use a D12 to give a little bit of variance. How many turns or problems how many decisions does a player make in a Blitzspiel?
3 to 5.
3 to 5. Okay.
3 to 5. It's a staff game, so it's just like your one team go to rooms, work together, write your dispatches. Write your dispatches with these forces that you have, because that way you can get them together and they don't have to be. I don't want to say it's a problem, but there is you need to devote a lot of time to an open Saturday, and I would say like 90% of the time in an open Saturday, you're sitting around in your own channel, sweating your ass off.
Right.
You're sitting in your own channel talking to nobody.
Right.
When I was still like just freshly out of college and I was in an open Saturday, I remember going out to buy groceries.
Right.
And like listening to the open Saturday the entire time and being like, oh yeah, no, here, I'm going to do these orders. And I was just walking around
It certainly
but
is
it's
a dangerous, sharp edge of the format where you have to replicate a large force. You've got the guy in reserve that's sitting there twiddling his thumbs, waiting for something to happen. So he goes and buys some groceries, or goes on a run, or
yep,
maybe keeps in shape that way. Other people just sit and stare at their screen and perspire, as you point out. Yeah. And so in a
yep.
Blitzspiel, what is it that works? What did you find in doing that worked really well?
What worked really well was getting everybody, not only getting everybody in a single room, but there is a very fun moment of revealing them. Hey, you were actually fighting this battle.
Okay.
You were actually fighting Stalingrad. You were actually fighting Kriegsspiel, because by 3 turns, these guys are already hooked.
Yeah.
They have been debating strategies, debating tactics. It's going very simple. They're getting their updates. They're getting their news. They're going like, hey, what should we do here? They're having these genuine conversations, and these are very new people. These are people with little to no experience, and
Yeah.
they're having genuine discussions. They're trying to think like, hey, this is what we should do. They're not yet at the point where I would say like they're trying to think of what the opponent is going to do, which is sort of like an advancement, but they're trying to think of like, okay, this is what I should do. This is how we're trying to win. And then when you review to them that actually the entire you were fighting this campaign, and this side won the battle of whatever. This side won the Waterloo campaign. This side won the Battle of Stalingrad.
Yeah.
This side won Gettysburg. There is that great moment of like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Where they're trying to figure out. Oh, this is actually that. If you just rotate the map.
Yeah, right. So they get a little reveal as part of it. What is the actual time taken? Did you find when you actually implemented it? Well, you were shooting for an hour.
Oh God, 90 minutes.
About 90 minutes.
90 minutes.
Yeah.
90 minutes, and most of it is just like getting people together into a room.
Yeah. Right. Okay. And did in 90 minutes, four or five decisions to make. You get a bit of a reveal on the battle. New players. That's great. And then what's the future of that format? Are you going to keep developing it?
I'm going to. There's 2 things that I kind of want to do. The first one is Swenson was talking about doing a similar thing for ancient battles, because ancient battles you don't really get to do all those sorts of decisions. You get maybe 4 or 5 decisions, but I'm going to actually wager that like you get to do the same thing as a commander in chief in anything that's not to that level. You're going to get like 3-4 decisions as a commander in chief, even in Napoleonic periods.
Absolutely. Well, you could make the case that the ancients had the same problem that World War One had. Is when you set a plan in motion, it was really difficult to make any changes.
Yep.
So, and really,
but
even Napoleonics, we pretend that you can make all these sweeping changes, but the reality is, you could commit a reserve is kind of what you did, right? So,
you really can't. You send an order. That order has to travel all the way down. If you've ever been in like a very high level game where you're an army commander and you've got a brigade commander at a bit in 2, you send an order. That order is not coming off until like the hour.
And there's going to be no meaningful outcome from it. Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's interesting. So I remember I saw your Blitzspiel posts and things like that for a good bit. You were doing quite a few of those. So I would encourage you to keep chasing that idea a little bit, because those are meaningful experiences for players and can give them a taste of what we do here. And we don't always have to do a 5-hour marathon session or a 3-month game. We can do these other formats that help give a good experience, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I've been trying to condense them a little bit so we can. The other one is just trying to teach it to other people, because I can't beat the only guy running them.
Right.
It's nice, but they're not difficult games to run, and they're also good because one of the problems that you have with umpiring, as I said, is the same. Is like I just finished Mill Springs. I was devoting like 5 hours I'll say 5 hours a week to Mill Springs.
Yep.
That's a genuine considerate hobby. Like in terms of the time that I'm wasting, the game just finished.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I could water my plants or whatever.
You could water your
It,
plants.
yeah, no, like I could tend. You can tend to a garden, a fairly large garden in those same 5 hours a week. I can record. Oh, I'm going these 5 hours a week. I could be doing something else with them, and
That's
I could be running three.
I think that's true, my friend. That's another one of your big ideas. At 5 hours, you can get a lot done more productively than doing these games. That is absolutely true.
And yep.
I think that's fantastic. The only hobby that consumes more time than this one is golf.
Oh God.
Uh, how do you avoid burnout? I mean, you're a busy guy. You're a lot of energy. You're working. Um, how do you avoid burnout?
How do I avoid burnout? Don't run games.
Take a break from it, huh?
Yeah. Right now, I am on. So Mill Springs was like the second game I ran in this year.
Okay.
That wasn't a live game. Live games are a good way to get a bunch of it done because you just get it all out in one go. You get the 5 hours a week that you devote
Yeah, right. You do
to
it all at
your
once.
wargaming
Right.
hobby in one go as an umpire. And you get it all out in one go, or you do like two games that are like 2.5 hours long or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
but you go um, at that point in time, you can do other things. You can go and like research
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Change it up a little bit with
you
your research.
don't need to be always running games because running games is effort. Um, running games is a lot of writing.
That's right.
Running games running games is 90% writing, and if you're someone who likes writing, these games are going to demand a lot of you because yeah, you can just like wing it and go um, oh, this happens.
Yeah.
You can have, but if you're really focused on trying to create that sort of chaos, that sort of like battle fog of war, you have to do it through words the same way that you would with a DM. But if you're a DM, you only have to do it once to the entire table.
Right.
For this, you have to do it individually for each player. That
Yeah.
is a lot of effort. Even if you copy and paste,
It's a lot of effort.
yep. Even if you copy and paste like some of it, because I had a few like you see this thing, and then I copy and pasted it with like this is an event from the actual historical battle of Mill Springs. There's one where a hare enters the coat of a
Yeah,
lieutenant
you,
that's
you
lying
you
down.
posted that in the Umpire stream.
Yep, and that one was just like this is an actual thing that happened during the battle. I'm just gonna quote it because it's funny.
Right.
Uh, the
But that means a rabbit went in the coat of every commander in the game.
No, it went into they saw like this happened to a lieutenant.
Okay. Well, those poor
It's just like
lieutenants.
this lieutenant is lying down and whoop,
You had 22
enters the
lieutenants
hair.
with rabbits in their coats. That's funny.
Yep, into like one specific lieutenant
Right.
that on the inside, and if you were close enough to it, you would get that event.
Right. I was trying to look up. I just did a resolution today, and my computer's not allowing me to do it. But I counted the words of a resolution
Yep.
recently, and it was something like 2,700 words, and that's a significant amount of writing for one resolution, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
if you add up all basically the essays you write each player about what's happening, you can get anywhere from 1,500 to 2,700 words, and I actually write quite sparingly. So if you look at a Glorious Ruse or some of these other really prolific people, they're writing quite a bit. So you do have to like to write. That is true. And if that causes you,
Gobbler's Game.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Gobbler's Game on Hoover's Gap. That was one which was like, how is this guy doing this? And he was like, this
absolutely.
took all my free time after.
So
He's just like, I'm not going to run any games.
You literally take a break from umpiring in order to keep your energy up.
You really do.
Okay.
It's one of those things where like you don't need unless you're Swensey or James or whatever. This is something you live and die for. These guys have like James is like what 5 kids.
Well, James is a magical creature. I'm not even sure I think he comes out of a Lord of the Rings book or something. The rate that he produces is just shocking, and I think science needs to study him, frankly. But he's an energetic. He's got a lot going on, and what a tremendous guy. So I don't have his energy. It's amazing. So, what advice would you give a new umpire, one of these folks that were in your Mill Springs game, to coming out and what advice would you give them to get them off the ground? That we don't cover kind of in the new umpire channel all the time. What would you say?
Advice. I know a lot of people talk about run a black powder game, run a run a small black powder game. I don't think it needs to be a black powder game.
Yep.
And don't try to get your perfect game. Just try to get a game and try to get a game that you will like and that you have done a lot of research on. Because the reason we say, do Napoleonics, do American Civil Wars, because I can point to research. I can tell you to read Nosworthy. I can tell you to like, hey, here's the books you should read.
Right.
If you're going to define that sort of thing. That is shorthand. That is, but you can look into other books, other resources in terms. And if you're the kind of person who's really, really, really into World War II combat, there's nothing stopping you from taking your favorite World War II game, ripping out basically all the command innards and stuffing it back in with a command system that is appropriate to the period.
I think that's a terrific point. And that's your 5th gold star for this conversation, is that if you don't read Napoleonic books and you don't have that kind of information in your natural knowledge base, it's going to be painful to do a Napoleonic black powder because you're kind of working with nothing.
Yep.
Where if you've read 50 books on Vietnam, you know every single trail and you know every unit and all that, you're going to be able to do a Vietnam game off the back of your, out of your head because you know Vietnam. So, and even though it's a much more complex thing, you can then size it correctly. I think that's a great piece of advice there. See, you didn't even know you had all this wisdom, and here you are, portraying it all. What last words would you like to say to the umpire community? And we're going to have you back on, so this is not the final word. But what other ideas or your last words for the umpire group would you have to say?
For today, I am going to say that this is the lifeblood of the IKS. Even if you're running a game, even if it's not your preferred thing, if you just run a game every 3 months or whatever, just like say I'm going to run this game for the trimester. And then that's gonna be that. This is my spring game. This is my season game. This is my spring game. This is my summer game.
Yeah.
You're going to be an important part of the community. I know Ruse basically runs a game every 3 months.
Yeah,
because that's what he has time for. And
he's writing poetry anthologies, so he's got to keep that going.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Anyway. But you're right. You don't have to. There's no reason to umpire all the time. I think that's a great point.
Yeah, it's just if you run a game a season, that's enough to keep people interested.
Yeah.
And that's enough to keep people not just... You might not be, the guy. You might not be Swensey when people just churn up... some people are just going to churn up to your game because it's a new game, and after because it's a Swensey game. But it's just a game. I got a lot of false starts. Keep trying. I think I started 5. I think it was 3 or 4 games where it just went nowhere.
Yeah.
And then,
but
they just didn't go anywhere.
That's a terrific point. Run them at your own pace. That's all that matters, and keep yourself engaged and involved. There's always going to be people here to play Kriegsspiel, right?
Yep.
That's terrific. GPuzzle, thanks so much for coming on. You've had several excellent points tonight. I really enjoyed talking to you and getting to know you. Now I got a chance to see your your shining face here, but we know it's an
Thank you.
audio only podcast. But I know we play a lot of online together. You've been in my games, and I enjoy talking online. So thanks so much for coming on. Hopefully we'll get you back on soon.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.